What's up, Guardians? Profane here. Thanks for checking out the video. Today we're checking out one of the most exciting, most durable, and most powerful Stormcaller builds that's currently in Destiny. With key changes to some select exotics that occurred earlier this season, and a few new legendary weapons that have come out recently, this is a build that just keeps getting better. And in Season of the Wish, when you combine the powers of the Karnstein Armlets and the Stormcaller subclass, you'll turn into an unstoppable killing machine. And I know what you're thinking, why are we using an Arc build in a season where there's so much focus towards solar and strand builds? Well, to be honest, there's so many amazing weapons, exotics, and builds in Destiny that it's just not sensible to limit yourself to just a select few. And if you do, you're taking a lot of the fun out of the game. And even though we won't be taking advantage of any of the solar-oriented artifact mods, there's still several others that we will be implementing into this electrifying build. Earlier this season, the Karnstein Armlets saw a complete rework of its intrinsic trait, which makes the synergy between the Karnsteins and this Stormcaller build even more cohesive. The Karnstein Armlets provide the Vampire's Caress intrinsic trait, which grants Cure and Restoration whenever you defeat an enemy with a charged or uncharged melee, a finisher, or a glaive melee. These are effects that you would typically need to be on a solar build to receive. And since the biggest drawback to Arc builds have been the lack of health restoration, the Karnstein Armlets will sufficiently fill that gap. When Vampire's Caress activates, it'll grant a 3-stack of Cure, which will instantly restore your health bar. And it also provides a 2-stack of Restoration, which grants continuous health recovery, coming in at 50 points every second, which will last 8 seconds. Each additional melee, finisher, or glaive final blow will refresh these effects, providing us with an extremely reliable and ongoing source of health recovery. To maximize the effectiveness of the Karnstein Armlets, we are using the Lightning Surge aspect. This converts our standard melee attack into a much more destructive and much more satisfying ability. We'll still be able to perform our standard melee attack, but whenever we activate our melee ability while sliding, we'll blink forward, transforming into a massive ball of lightning that slams into nearby enemies. This causes a massive amount of area damage, and it creates a lightning strike at the point of contact, causing all nearby enemies to become jolted. Most any rank and file enemy will be obliterated in this process, triggering that Cure and Restoration immediately, and any other enemies that are still standing afterwards should be low enough to be instantly finished. It might not be as powerful as a Titan's shoulder charge, but it definitely gets the job done, and it's given us health back in the process. And with our other class tree selections, in combination with our weapon choices and artifact mods, we'll be able to amplify the performance of this lightning strike even more so. We are using Electrostatic Mind, so whenever we defeat enemies who are jolted or blinded, or when we defeat enemies with arc abilities, ionic traces will be generated. Ionic traces will make us amplified, increasing our mobility, our slide distance, jumping distance, and weapon reload speed and handling. But ionic traces will also provide us with 12.5% grenade and melee energy and 15% extra class ability energy, allowing us to have all of our abilities back at a much faster rate. We do have the Chain Lightning melee attack selected, which is going to cause lightning to chain through all nearby enemies whenever we strike with a charged melee, and this is going to carry over into our Lightning Surge ability. When it comes to our choice in grenade, we are going with flashbang grenades, which will complement our use of Lightning Surge. This way we have the ability of blinding targets with those grenades and not just causing damage. This will disorient enemies and stun unstoppable champions, and it takes them out of combat temporarily, long enough for us to perform a lightning surge. When it comes to our fragments, we're using Spark of Recharge. This grants a 400% increase in the recharge rate of our grenade and melee ability whenever we are critically wounded. We're also using Spark of Ions, so we'll have even more ability energy coming back to us, because whenever we defeat a jolted target, an ionic trace will be created, adding to the ionic traces that are already getting generated because of Electrostatic Mind. A build that focuses around melee use means you'll be near enemies a lot, so we're using Spark of Resistance, so that when we are near at least 3 enemies, we'll have a 25% reduction to any incoming damage. And to amplify the damage of our Lightning Surge, we're using Spark of Feedback, so whenever we take melee damage, we'll receive a 75% increase to the damage of our next melee attack. This will really help improve the damage that we're able to do against champions and other high-ranking enemies. There is one alternate fragment that I want to point out. I'm not using it with my current setup because my resilience and recovery are already very high with this build, but Spark of Haste does provide 20 extra points of resilience, recovery, and mobility whenever we're sprinting, which can be immensely beneficial since we'll be performing a lot of lightning surges. The last class tree item that I want to discuss is our choice in Super. Most of the time, Storm Trance is more than sufficient. It melts rank and file enemies instantly and really eats away at those yellow bars. But when you have a lot of big tanky champions, tormentors, or bosses to deal with, Chaos Reach will be a much better super option so that you can instantly wipe those enemies right off the board. With class tree options covered, let's talk about what character stats and what armor mods that you need to focus on using. Resilience and recovery are both vital stats to focus on, especially when going into in-game content, so having these as close to 100 as possible is definitely preferred. Between orbs and ionic traces, our grenade and melee energy will already have amazing uptime, but I would still lean towards focusing on strength to ensure that we have our lightning surge available as often as possible. When it comes to armor mods, our main focus is going to be creating orbs and improving the regeneration of our abilities. So on our helmets, we're using hands-on, so we'll gain bonus super energy when defeating enemies with our melee. And we're using 2 harmonic siphon mods, which will create orbs off of arc weapon final blows. And since we're using 2 of these, it'll cause orbs to be created more often. On our gloves, we're using 2 heavy-handed mods, so that we'll be able to create orbs off of melee final blows once every 6 seconds. With all the orbs that we'll be generating, we'll be able to make use of them with melee kickstart. Whenever we have armor charges active and perform a charged melee, those armor charges will be converted into melee energy, providing us with as much as 33% additional energy instantly. We'll also be generating additional melee energy thanks to the use of the Invigoration Boots mod. So between Ionic Traces, Melee Kickstart, and all of these orbs, we'll have incredible uptime of our Lightning Surge. We'll also be able to add extra health recovery into the equation by utilizing the Recuperation Boots mod, which will give us 40 points of health whenever we collect an orb. We'll get Cure and Restoration as it is thanks to the Karnstein Armlets, but it's never going to hurt to have some extra sources of health regeneration. Since armor charges are needed when using melee kickstart, we're using stacks on stacks. This way when we collect an orb, we'll have 2 armor charges instead of 1. And if we also use the charged up chest mod, we could have a 4th armor charge that could be used, which would provide additional melee energy whenever melee kickstart gets activated. One alternate option on chest armor would be emergency reinforcement. Whenever your overshield breaks, armor charges are consumed to provide you with damage reduction, but this would interfere with the use of melee kickstart, so I wouldn't recommend running the 2 of them together. When it comes to our class item, we're using the Reaper mod, so that we'll create additional orbs, which is going to help us get that energy regeneration going and help us stack those armor charges. We're also using Proximity Ward. Since finishers provide Cure and Restoration, we have more of a reason to perform these. And to ensure that we're not going to die in the middle of a finisher, Proximity Ward will cast an overshield as the finisher gets performed. Outreach would be a great additional mod to use with your class item, as it will generate extra melee energy whenever casting your Rift. But there's one other mod that you may want to consider utilizing, especially with the current state of special and heavy ammo economy. Special Finisher will create special ammo for you and allies whenever you have at least 3 armor charges active and perform a finisher. This could really come in handy if you're leaning heavily into the use of your special weapons, but just keep in mind that it can interfere with melee kickstart or emergency reinforcement. Before we look at the weapons that complete this build, let's jump over and look at our seasonal artifact. Now, we could utilize some of this season's strand artifact mods, like Unraveling Orbs and Horde Shuttle, which would synergize with the new Wishkeeper exotic bow, which creates traps, something that would pair up very nicely with lightning surges. And there's legendary strand weapons that come with Slice, which reduces the damage output from your enemies by 40%. But it's the stasis artifact mods that we're really interested in here, as we're looking at honing in on that synergy between Arc and stasis. We'll talk more in depth about our weapon choices here soon, but we are using stasis weapons that include traits like Headstone and Chill Clip. This way we can utilize the effects of mods like Pillar of Ice. Defeating enemies who are completely frozen has a chance of spawning a stasis crystal, which you can use as makeshift cover, or you can shatter it to create additional damage to nearby enemies. We're also using Dragon's Bite, so when we break an opponent's shield with a stasis weapon, that enemy has a chance of becoming frozen. Both of these artifact mods are going to be directly impacted by the use of the Hail the Storm artifact mod. Shattering frozen enemies and stasis crystals causes a significant amount of additional damage, and when shattering stasis crystals, tiny little shards of ice will be released that will track down nearby enemies, causing them to become slowed. Slowed and frozen enemies are going to be perfect targets when we have flashbang grenades or lightning surges that we can use to finish them off. We're also using Wished into Being, so when our super energy is close to being full, our ability final blows will create extra orbs, helping us and allies regain super energy faster. With the addition of Blast Radius, Overload Rockets, and Argent Ordnance, rocket launchers are going to be a great addition to this loadout. With these active, we can create additional armor charges, cause extra damage, and stun overload champions when using rocket launchers. There's also Solo Operative, so when we are in activities alone, this will provide us with a 15% bonus to all weapon and all ability damage, but it's only going to be beneficial when we are in an activity solo. So now that we know how this season's artifact is going to affect this build, let's talk about our choice in weapons. As always is the case, the activity that you're participating in and any modifiers that it may have will be the deciding factors on what weapon loadout that you will need to use. We already know that glaives are going to be very beneficial with this build, and because of the seasonal artifact, so will stasis weapons. Starting with our kinetic options, the Lingering Dread grenade launcher is my number one choice. With Chill Clip, we can apply slow and freeze. It does take longer to trigger those than it used to, but we've also got Ambitious Assassin, and when this thing has 2 in the chamber, it can spit them out quick. There's also a few strong exotic weapons that will fit here into the kinetic slot. The Vergless Curve will really excel with these seasonal artifact mods, giving us plenty of crystals and frozen enemies to shatter, and the same can be said for Aegir's Scepter. There's also the Monte Carlo, which is one of the smartest choices with this build, since it will rapidly regenerate melee energy. The Osteostriga or the Thorn would be great choices as well, since you'll be able to stick those enemies with some poison and then hit them with lightning surges, and all of those stasis effects. When it comes to our energy slot, we've got a lot of really fun and really high-powered options, both in terms of primary weapons and special. When it comes to primary energy weapons, our first choice is the Trinity Ghoul. This amazing bow comes with Lightning Rod, which causes lightning strikes, and that can be triggered with any arc final blow, so it'll be a terrific choice to use with Karnstein. There's also the Centrifuge, a really fun auto rifle that has the ability of creating blinding explosions. But if we're using a primary exotic weapon in the energy slot and it's not the Trinity Ghoul, then it's probably going to be the Risk Runner. This SMG creates an arc overshield, automatically reloads itself, and provides damage reduction whenever you take arc damage. We're already getting Cure and Restoration out of this build, so having the benefits of Risk Runner can really make you unkillable. When it comes to the legendary weapons in the energy slot, the Indebted Kindness is definitely my first choice. This is such a powerful weapon right now. This rocket sidearm comes out of Warlord's Ruin, and with the anti-barrier mod equipped, it'll be able to pierce barrier shields. And if you can also get it with Volt Shot, it'll be able to stun overloads. And when we look at our heavy slot, our number one choice is the Cold Comfort rocket launcher. With bait and switch, the Cold Comfort can put up more damage than any other rocket launcher. which will make it a great option for DPS. But if you can get it with Chill Clip instead, you'll be able to take on those Overload and Unstoppable champions. So honestly, I would recommend having one of each. And you can get the Cold Comfort out of the Ghost of the Deep dungeon. And since Glaives will bring us a lot of benefit, the Winter Bite will be a fantastic exotic option, as it'll synergize with those artifact mods and with the Karnstein Armlets. And with that, we've now covered just about every damn thing I can think of with this amazing, electrifying Stormcaller build featuring the Karnstein Armlets. I know it might be difficult for a lot of Warlocks right now to break away from those solar builds, but if you can manage to do so, I would highly encourage checking out this incredible build, because I guarantee you're going to have some fun. And with that said, I wish you all the best of luck throughout the rest of this season. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel. If you're a new Light Guardian, just starting your journey, or a battle-hardened veteran just looking for a new home, then be sure to check out the Discord link in the description below and join one of the greatest communities in all of Destiny. And if you're trying to make a quick copy of today's build, you can easily do so by visiting the Destiny Item Manager link that's also in the description below. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.